Ladies and gentlemen, we welcome you live to episode number 39 right here on the Eastern Observer. And oh my goodness, I see someone that looks very familiar to all of us here. We'll get to his name in just a moment. But ladies and gentlemen, we welcome you live to episode number 39 right here on the Eastern Observer and I-95 Sports Network on Zingo Television, channel 198. I'm Joey Jarzynka. We'd like to welcome our co-hosts Ian Schraier and Rob DeLuca, and also our special guest here for the first time in a very long time, not a Coke man, Tyler Adele. Tyler,
not a Coke, never a Coke.
Welcome back to your old stomping grounds. How have things gone for you?
Things are very adult world-like. I don't like it. I'd rather be here.
Yeah. There you go.
I'm glad I'm here.
There you go. We're extremely grateful that you are here as well. Guys, Ian, Rob, how are you both?
Doing well, Joey. Looking forward to talking a couple hours here of sports. Especially we're going to have a couple of other special guests on tonight as well to discuss a little college hoops. So I'm looking forward to it all.
It's going to be tons of fun here, ladies and gentlemen, on this Friday, October 30th, just prior to Halloween. I can't believe that Halloween's already tomorrow, and time is flying, fellas. But as we heard in the beginning of our show, we heard "Dirty Little Hipster," and what that may be, that is our special guest, and the artist that it is presented by is Andrew Giordano and Black Cats NYC. Actually, someone very close to Tyler Adele, his uncle. He came out with a new hit single, "Dirty Little Hipster," and that's what you heard in the top of the show. Buy it, and it's available on Apple Music, Deezer, YouTube, SoundCloud, Amazon Music, Google Play, Pandora, and Spotify, ladies and gentlemen. So please, for all of those that liked our open, you know where to find it on those platforms. And the name of the song is "Dirty Little Hipster," out now by Black Cats NYC. Let's get into it, fellas. We've got a lot to talk about because, actually, just before we get into it, Tyler actually has a fundraising opportunity through GoFundMe. Let's give it a little bit of a welcome here. I want to know what we can do to help support the first responders, as a lot of that has been going to that. Give us a little bit of background on that, Tyler.
Yeah, so this fundraiser is actually going to be we're going to be helping the homeless with this one. So this is something my sister has done in the past. Normally, she would be donating winter clothes, blankets, but with the coronavirus pandemic this year, that's not something that's very feasible. You know, you don't want to bring around germs to other people. You know, limit the spread as much as we can. But we wanted to do something, and we came up with this great idea of putting together like a care package almost, a bag of like, I guess the bare essentials you would call it, or some basic necessities, a couple of like snacks, some water, just to help out, you know, give somebody a helping hand while, you know, the weather's starting to cool down. It's going to start to get really cold overnight. It's ultimately, at the end of the day, the best opportunity we could come up with. But, well, I shouldn't say we, I should say she came up with. But it's, so far, it's actually going extremely well. I do actually have a bag really quick that I can show you. Like I said, it's very bare minimal stuff. There's packages of tissues in here, toothbrush, toothpaste, some plastic utensils. With COVID going on, you know, a 2-pack of face masks just so everybody can stay safe. You know, socks, gloves. Here's the toothbrush I was telling you about. You know, a healthcare kit. You know, there's so much stuff in here, and we were actually able to put the bag together, including the bag, for less than $15.
And how can people donate as well?
So there's multiple ways to get in touch with us. Obviously, if you want to inquire about a donation, you can reach out to myself on any of my social media. My Twitter at Tyler Adele2, my Instagram at Tyler_Adele, or at Primetime Tyler. You can reach out to me on my personal Facebook, my email, which I'll be, you know, is always provided through the Eastern Observer. There is also a GoFundMe account that I know I shared the link with you guys later. I know we're going to start blasting that out in a bit. I will blast it out myself, so always keep an eye on my social medias for that as well.
There we go. Very good. All good things, especially now when a lot of people are they need a helping hand. So I guess I was a little off when I was talking about first responders, but Tyler did he did correct me, and it was all about the homeless. So very good stuff to
All right.
and to you yourself as well. So GoFundMe, please follow Tyler Adele on all social media. We'll be talking about it and blasting it through on all of our social media pages here on the Eastern Observer. So, guys, let's get to it. We're 5 minutes in already, 6:06, 6 minutes past the top of the hour. We've got, the Los Angeles Dodgers won their first World Series title in 32 years. First one since 1988, and this one was really all about the legendary Vin Scully, who retired a year and a half or 2 years ago almost, and he's 92 years old. And I think that was really, really cool to see, and not only to see but also to hear the great Joe Buck as well. And I can't believe I just said great Joe Buck, but again, he really is a Hall of Fame broadcaster. He brought up his father, of course, Jack Buck, but then also brought up how can you not bring up Vin Scully when you're talking about the Los Angeles Dodgers? They won game number 6-1 against the Tampa Bay Rays. So, and also there was a lot of controversy as well. We'll get to that in just a moment. Blake Snell went 5 1/3 innings pitched, 2 hits, an earned run, 9 Ks in 73 total pitches. He was pulled by manager Kevin Cash after an Austin Barnes hit. That was only the second hit that was given up by Snell himself. And then Nick Anderson came in for the Tampa Bay Rays. He gave up a double, a game-tying wild pitch, and an RBI ground out. Now I want to get to Ian Schraier first, and I want to know the biggest thing here, which is are analytics are they starting to take over the game? And is it hurting the game of baseball? Because really, the Tampa Bay Rays should have kept in Blake Snell, regardless of what anything says on paper.
I think Joey was a little more inexperienced, and I want to say analytics. I thought the Boston Globe had a great quote in their article to recap Game 6 of the World Series, where they said the Tampa Bay Rays are playing with pencils and calculators. They're not completely wrong. I mean, Kevin Cash removes Blake Snell, who's absolutely dealing. It's exactly what you wanted to see from a former AL Cy Young Award winner in a must-win game. He's constantly changing the eye level. His velocity is somewhere in the mid to high 90s. And then he pulls him because Austin Barnes, the Dodgers 9-hitter, gets a base hit to turn over the lineup for Mookie Betts. And Kevin Cash's quote to that is, well, we have a lot of respect for Mookie at that point. You lose and you go home at this point. So I don't know what was really going through his thought really the entire series. I thought in Game 5 with Tyler Glasnow, who's really struggled the entire postseason, he really seemed to, after the first couple innings, to finally refine that form. What does Cash do? He yanks him out with less than 100, I think even less than 90 pitches at that point. So I think, to get back to my initial point, I think a lot of it was inexperience in the manager's chair. You had a manager for the Dodgers and Dave Roberts, who's been there a few times, against a guy like Kevin Cash, who hadn't been there yet, at least from a manager's standpoint. And I think because he was so conservative in the postseason, I think that worked against him a lot.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it, and we're going to get to Rob DeLuca in just a second. I want to say, actually, a quote following the World Series loss and the game clincher for the Dodgers, and what Kevin Cash had to say after, quote, "I regret the decision because it didn't work out. If we had to do it again, I would have the utmost confidence in Nick Anderson to get through that inning," end quote. So he not only messed up, but he also defended the action. Rob DeLuca, your thoughts on Blake Snell being pulled after 73 pitches, and also something that we've brought up in previous shows as well, guys, is that Blake Snell from innings 1 through 3 has an under 2 or sub 2 ERA, and then following the third inning from 4 all the way to 9 this season, it balloons all the way up to an 8 ERA, roughly. Rob, your thoughts?
Well, I mean, Joey, I guess you could pull up one of our favorite graphics now, because this is the perfect segue for
here we go.
My gears, personally.
Brian's Rob DeLuca's gears.
The thought process of analytics And the fact that that is what won the Dodgers the World Series was an analytical mistake by Kevin Cash and the Tampa Bay Rays. You do not. I don't care what this, oh no, cry me a river, it was the third time through the lineup crap means. Like, forget that. This is the World Series. Your best pitcher only giving up his second hit of the game at that point, 73 pitches, clearly dealing. The next three hitters, 0 for 6, 6 strikeouts. Tell me on what planet was that okay to make that move? And also, just personally to Kevin Cash as a Yankees fan, how'd that stable of guys who throw 98 miles an hour work out for you, buddy? Huh? I see you on the losing side of this now. You have no ring. The fact that you still have a job astounds me. Because I tell you this, in the city of New York, if Aaron Boone pulled something like that, he'd be tied down to the 4-train subway tracks that night. Are you kidding me? How on earth is Kevin Cash still employed for pulling one of the dumbest stunts in Major League Baseball? But back to the analytics for a second. That is, to answer your question, Joey, without question, ruining the game of baseball and also ruining other sports. Yes, they are a part of the game and should be, but they are overused and being relied on far too heavily.
Anyone want to chime in on that? Tyler, I want to know your opinion on all of this because you're a baseball fan yourself. And to see analytics really starting to take over the game of baseball, especially now in the World Series, and similar to what Ian said, where it was an experiment. Well, he's never been there before, yes. But also when your ace is throwing lights out, you're at 9 strikeouts, and this guy can't really perform in the 6th inning, and he's doing great. Why don't you leave him in?
So I am a fan of the analytics. I do believe they belong in the game. I believe they should be used as much as possible. However, I think that they should also be used properly. I think in a do or die game 6, probably not the time to really go off analytics. You go through your roster, you go 1 through 9, and then your best pitcher, and that's what you're going. You know, you don't have time to play with this guy hits better against lefties and this guy hits better when there's 3 birds on top of the flagpole. You don't have time for things like that in a do or die game. The decision, I think we can all agree, to take Blake Snell out of the game when he was wheeling and dealing. If I'm correct, in the 6th inning, he was still only at 75 pitches.
Correct.
That's absurd to take him out of the game there. When nowadays, we saw multiple Yankee games, multiple Met games where DeGrom, Cole, they're all pushing 100 pitches by the time they're leaving the 6th inning. And he's got 75 in a World Series game. You probably get 2 more innings out of him, and he probably helps you force a game 7. Would they win a game 7? I don't know. But you'll never know.
Right.
And I think to Tyler's point, this wasn't the first time that we saw Cash do it throughout the postseason. He did it in the Yankees series where he just got just a little, where his hands just started to get a little tight and he just didn't know whether or not to pull the trigger. And I think when that time comes, if I'm sitting in the manager's chair, I think it's very hard for me to say when I have a dependable bullpen that I don't want to go to them. But Tyler said it perfectly. When you're in a do or die game like that, analytics get thrown to the side. He's a former AL Cy Young winner. He delivered on that in game 6 and you pull him out with 75 pitches. I don't get it.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. It really is brutal. And the worst part, in my opinion, was that he then defended the decision following the loss. Blake Snell said, quote, he was disappointed. Well, obviously he was disappointed. There's no doubt about it because really, he could have kept on going. And we saw his facial expression when he saw Kevin Cash trance out of the dugout. Really, really bad stuff. But again, guys, now I want to look to the Dodgers side of things because the Dodgers win their first World Series title since 1988, 32 years in the making. Clayton Kershaw, one of the best pitchers of our generation, finally gets a ring. Well-deserved, and he's done really, really well. And the coolest part is that he only grew up 20 miles away from Arlington, so it was pretty cool. He had some people there watching as well, some of his childhood friends. This year's postseason, Clayton Kershaw was 4-1 with a 2.93 ERA, 30 and a 2/3 innings pitched, 10 earned runs, 37 strikeouts, and only 5 walks issued. And really, throughout this whole postseason, he has been phenomenal. And we saw great numbers against Milwaukee and also Tampa Bay in, I believe it was game one, where he had 13 strikeouts against Milwaukee on the 1st of October. And then on the 20th, against Tampa Bay, he had 8 strikeouts. He really played lights out. But let's not forget also, guys, the $350 million man, Mookie Betts. He was really, really great too. But also Corey Seager. He was given the MVP award. And I think, guys, that this is a perfect segue into something that we kind of got off of MajorLeagueBaseball.com. And what that is Rob Manfred actually issuing Corey Seager the MVP trophy. Tell me if there's something wrong with this video, ladies and gentlemen out there watching.
You thrilled our fans throughout the postseason with a great performance. You led the Dodgers to a World Series victory, and it's my pleasure to recognize your great play with the Willie Mays Most Valuable Player Award presented by Chevrolet.
I'll say this, he's not a good public speaker, that's for sure.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, I have to ask this question now about Corey Seager. What in the hell was that from
Alcohol.
Manfred, who not only was presenting the MVP trophy to Corey Seager that we said in last week's show, or I had said, I don't want to gloat too much, but last week I had said that he was really deserving of this MVP trophy.
Yep.
If all things were said and done. And, you know, don't get me wrong. We know about, we'll get to that after with Justin Turner. We'll get to that in a second. But Corey Seager, Mookie Betts, those two were absolutely phenomenal in this series, Ian.
Their numbers with just 2 outs were phenomenal. I mean, it seemed like when the Rays were ever going to get out of an inning, when they were out in the field on defense, that it just seemed like the Dodgers just always provided the timely hit, whether it was Mookie Betts or Cody Bellinger or Corey Seager. I mean, Corey Seager's numbers were just on another chart, to say the least. I think even leading into the World Series, he had the best odds in Vegas of actually winning the Willie Mays MVP award. But I just want to look back on that video of Rob Manfred and just think to myself, did he maybe contract COVID from Justin Turner, maybe before he came off the field? I'm not sure in that situation.
I mean, all joking aside, to sound like that and to say this. Rob DeLuca, your thoughts on those guys, that especially Corey Seager, who was named MVP.
Corey Seager, well deserving, clutch hit, clutch play after clutch play. Unbelievable series from both him and Mookie Betts. I knew it was going to come down to the two of them. I would have been happy with seeing either two of them win, and Corey Seager luckily came away with it. As for Rob Manfred, you're already widely considered the worst commissioner in the history of sports. Maybe showing up to that sauced was probably not the smartest idea. Because you can't be that. You can't be a professional commissioner and be that nervous speaking. Something else had to have played a factor into that. And my personal theory is that he was for some reason shocked by 11,000 people miraculously and notoriously booing him to death. 11,000 people booing in that stadium sounded louder than every NHL arena booing Gary Bettman for the last 10 years. It was unbelievable how loud that was. And you could see when he first started talking before the MVP, just presenting the World Series trophy, he was taken aback and shocked that he was getting booed. And I'm like, bro, how?
Tyler, your thoughts on Corey Seager, and then of course Rob Manfred, because we have to speak about this. It is I'm appalled to see this as a commissioner, where every commissioner is supposed to have at least about that much public speaking knowledge or experience, if you will.
Corey Seager, well-deserved MVP. He played out of his mind through the entire playoffs. As far as Rob Manfred goes,
Tyler speechless. That's a first.
You know, it is. It's I don't. You already know you're one of the most hated people, not in sports, on the planet, and you wonder why nobody takes you seriously. And then I don't know what he drank on the way out to the field, but there's no words for it. It's embarrassing to himself. It's embarrassing to the game of baseball. I'm more surprised that we haven't heard anything about it yet.
Yeah. Tyler, I'll tell you this much: it wasn't a Coke. That's for sure.
It was not. It was not a Coke. It was not a Coke.
Well, it's very funny. It's very funny because the Essential Wrestling Podcast's host, Al Carl, he had this to say about Rob Manfred, and he was hanging out with Joe Namath during the game. Yeah. So I mean, I gotta tell you, Al, that's pretty good. Ian gives you props.
Let's throw it back to that Monday Night Football game. Come on.
Oh my goodness. So Corey Seager, as we said, he won MVP honors. He batted .328, 22 for 67. He had 8 home runs, and he played a big part in the Atlanta series as well, with 3 home runs, 4 RBIs in games 5 through 7 of the NLCS, where he tallied those numbers, humongous numbers, and really carried this team from a 3-0 deficit against the Atlanta Braves. So really, really good stuff for Corey Seager, the now first-time world champion. Guys, one final thing here with the Los Angeles Dodgers, and this is a big, big no-no. We were talking about where Tyler was saying, if you would have kept Blake Snell in and could have forced a game 7. Well, guys, game 7 may not have been for another 2 to 3 weeks. And everyone knows what that means watching this show and listening. That means that someone had contracted COVID-19. And very funny because we got to see and hear after the 6th inning, Dodgers third baseman Justin Turner had tested positive for COVID-19. Now, let's not forget, he played 6 full innings as the starting third baseman for the LA Dodgers, okay? It's mind-boggling because don't try and tell me that someone did not know what the deal was. And I'm sure that, again, there are flaws to these tests. There's, hiccups with whatever it may be. But the worst part, in my opinion here, and I want to take this here where this is going to be the segment for now of what really grinds my gears. And it's really the truth because it's, we see everything that Justin Turner had eventually come back out onto the field. And that was under scrutiny. Why? Because he forced his way out onto the field and basically defied Major League Baseball, defied the security, defied the police that were there blocking it. And to me, fellas, I think that this has to be the greatest photo of all time because these two people have to be the stupidest people on the face of the earth. I don't care. His wife. I don't care if that's his wife. Oh, I don't care if that's his wife at all. Excuse me, my bad. I don't care if that's his wife. The fact of the matter is that you tested positive for COVID. Now you're going to go kiss your wife who now has it. Okay. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. And the best part is he's kissing her without a mask. Without a mask. But hold on. It gets even better, ladies and gentlemen. He is also celebrating with the commissioner's trophy in his hands, right? No gloves, nothing on, okay? Now you have the rest of the Los Angeles Dodgers organization touching that. Oh, but look, if I'm not mistaken, guys, wasn't Dave Roberts a cancer survivor years ago?
Yeah.
Oh, look at this. He's sitting here in front, or actually, next to his manager, Dave Roberts, and next to the trophy. All of these guys behind him, in front of him, the camera crew. This guy here, all the way on the left of your screen, took off his mask. Now, I'm going to say something here that may really kind of aggravate some people out there. Justin Turner is a horrendous human being. And I don't care what any Mets fan, Dodgers fan, any fan says. He thought about himself and himself only, and he defied everything else, defied authority, defied whatever, and he was under isolation. And I don't care if you are 36 years old and you are now an unrestricted free agent. He just finished a 4-year deal worth $64 million. Okay, he hit 307 during the year, 23 RBIs, great stuff. 3 home runs, 6 RBIs, and he hit 2 of those home runs in the World Series, batted .320. Good for you. The one thing that I will say is that he had an option. I would have no problem at all, if he went into right field by himself. Let everyone else take the picture, or you have him out in right field by himself, let everyone do their thing, but you have now contracted it. You are officially ineligible to be a part of whatever is going on. I actually want to start off with Tyler Adele on this, because we were talking about this separately off the camera. And this is actually something that I want to bring up here from Dodgers president of baseball operations, Andrew Friedman, who, by the way, was a part of the Tampa Bay organization. Quote, having a mask on and staying socially distanced, he wanted to come out and take a picture with the trophy, which I can't state strongly enough how big of a role he's played in the success of this organization, end quote. Okay, so that means Andrew Friedman is an ignoramus as well. Tyler Adele, let's go to you, and what really grinds your gears?
I'm going to need some nerds for this one. Bear with me. Oh, boy.
There we go.
Okay. So, I would have been totally okay with Justin Turner coming out on the field, doing his thing, had he never known. Obviously, it's not his fault if he doesn't get his test back in time. My big problem with this whole thing more or less is aimed towards the MLB than Justin Turner. So I get you're on a time crunch. You want to finish your season on time, but you're doing a COVID test before every single game of the playoffs. Totally cool. You're doing the right thing. If the tests were not back before the beginning of the game, that game should have never started. It should have been on a delay, or it should have been pushed back a day. That game should not have started until every test came back. Because had every test come back, and we knew well beforehand that Justin Turner was going to have COVID-19, he's not even in the arena to be at issue. But now, like you said, he's playing tonsil hockey with his wife, holding the trophy, taking pictures next to Dave Roberts, which I'm not trying to single the guy out, but again, he's a cancer survivor. He's immunocompromised.
It's horrendous.
Yeah, you're a terrible person.
Yeah.
He put himself first. And you know what? The down-to-earth side of me would really like to sit here and say, hey, you want to celebrate with the trophy? That's cool. Why don't you wait till you're in the locker room where there's no cameras around, stupid?
Right.
But you weren't even smart enough to do that. You only cared about yourself.
Ian Schraier, your thoughts and what really grinds your gears, because not only that, and this is something for those that are first-time watchers, Ian Schraier is a father. So not only that, Ian, you have a daughter, 2-year-old Emma, and really it's disturbing to see this as a parent when you saw not only elderly people on the field, but also there were children on the field as well.
And I'm not even so sure that anyone on the show knows this. Back in March, I had COVID-19, and I have no problem sharing that with my audience as well. I mean, I had a very mild case of it, thankfully. I never had to go to the hospital, thankfully, but I had it. I had it really right at the start of it when people really didn't know what it was. But for me, I'm going to piggyback off what Tyler Adele is saying, and COVID-19 has a real effect on me and the way people are discussing it and the way it's talked about in our society today. First off, from the league perspective, if these tests are being given before every single game, when are these tests being given? And B, with all the money that's in Major League Baseball, why aren't the turnarounds on these tests when at hospitals they are turning these tests around in minutes? Are we not finding this about Justin Turner sooner? I understand he was asymptomatic, and I'm going to get back to that word in a second. But this is just another blemish to add on to Rob Manfred's horrid career as commissioner of Major League Baseball. This isn't so much. I mean, yeah, the Dodgers deserve a lot of blame. Okay. And congratulations again to the Dodgers on winning the World Series. But this is also on Major League Baseball. It's not the LA Dodgers that are implementing these tests. It's not the Tampa Bay Rays that's implementing these tests. It's Major League Baseball. So this all falls in some way or form under Rob Manfred's umbrella. And how about the fact that Justin Turner wasn't taken out of the game until the 7th inning? The game shouldn't have been played. Why? And I'm going to keep harping back on this. When were these tests given, and why weren't the results gotten back sooner? Why aren't I could care less if you're giving out these tests at 8 o'clock in the morning, 7 o'clock in the morning. Do what you need to ensure that the right players are on the field and no one is possibly being exposed, which means in the clubhouse, in the dugout, out on the field, players high-fiving each other, whatever it may be. You're telling me for 6 innings, whether or not asymptomatic, someone who contracted COVID is out there on the field, possibly exposing it to other players, even fans on the field, because you can catch it through the air. It's not just it's not like the chicken pox. Like, I scratch your back, guess what? I'm going to end up with chicken pox. No, this is an airborne disease. Okay. And what it comes down with for me is that it's just the irresponsible nature of Justin Turner. I understand you wanted to be out there. You flat out defied security. Security told you to stay in the clubhouse. You completely defied security. You're supposed to be setting an example for the children. We're supposed to be moving forward from COVID. We want everything to go back to normal. And all you've done is just taken us a step back.
Yeah. Rob DeLuca.
Joe, really quickly, I want to, you know what? I'm going to let Rob go because I want to see if anybody else picks up on what I had to add that I forgot to add.
DeLuca.
Major League Baseball should be incredibly ashamed of themselves for allowing this to happen. The fact of the matter is that you find out the test is inconclusive in the 2nd inning. At that point, how do you not – first of all, yeah, you need to figure out a way to get these tests done before the game even starts. Everything needs to be done first of all. So this game should have been delayed to begin with. But the moment you find that out, that also should have paused the game at that point. Doesn't even matter that it's mid-game already at that point, because now that this news has been now known to you, which obviously means Rob Manfred, because seriously, who else is calling the Dodger dugout at this point other than someone who's at the arena? And all of a sudden look, Justin Turner, completely selfish human being. What he did is despicable. I can't even get into how pissed off I am with him, because that could end up NSFW. We don't need that on Primetime Rundown. But as Ian said, we need to be going forward from this. And this whole situation is bringing us a step back. And for the love of God, the owners need to get together and get Rob Manfred out of baseball, because this is entirely his fault. And that is where I stand on this.
Tyler Adele, let's get back to you. What did you pick up that maybe we did not?
Oh, I'm glad. I'm glad actually that Rob didn't pick up on that. No offense. So, we all agree that the MLB has to take a serious percentage of the fault for this entire thing.
100%.
What I think nobody picked up on, and we were just making fun of the guy, the MLB was in the building with him and did nothing. The MLB was in the building. Yeah. Did not come out on. Now, don't get me wrong. He was a stumbly mess, and he probably would have. I don't know. He probably would have done a keg stand with the trophy. But he's in the building. He didn't enforce anything. He has all the authority to enforce a police escort if he's gonna refrain or be what's the word I'm looking for? Combative. It's in the nicest way I can say it. If he was afraid of an altercation happening, grow a set.
Yeah.
Show us all that there's that you have something in your shorts, because you've shown us in the last X amount of years you have no backbone.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's a perfect, and I would say it's a perfect segue into the next topic, but we're actually going to skip that topic and then come back to it. Because it's an absolute disgrace with Major League Baseball, and it's very funny. Tyler knows this, Ian knows this, because them two have been on the show with a former host of ours. And, basically what what it came down to is that baseball's credibility continues to decline, left and right. And this is something that I've continuously said also. And it's really sad to say, especially when America's pastime is supposed to be America's pastime. But guess what, ladies and gentlemen, it's slowly dying. Whether people like it or not, we are seeing attendance numbers decline. We are seeing Little League numbers decline. Everything is slowly going away from the game of baseball. And I would not be surprised when me, Tyler, and Rob are like 80, 90 years old, that baseball has taken that baseball. I'm going to say it's still going to be here, obviously, but the impact that Major League Baseball has on the country and the world today will not be near what it is here in 2020 or even in the Bud Selig era. It's really, really, really sad. Going back to Justin Turner one last time, as we did say, he's an unrestricted free agent at the age of 36. And it's just pathetic, and we're going to leave it off on that. Let's get into something a little bit more positive, and this here is for the Mets fans out there. Ian Schraier, you are a diehard Mets fan. Hallelujah. Steve Cohen is officially the CEO and chairman of the New York Mets. Clap it up to Jerry Reinsdorf, who voted no.
No, I'm not going to clap it up to Jerry Reinsdorf, and I need to find
man.
some tissues from the happy tears that were pouring out of my eyes today about the announcement that the long, and I know I'm on a show with 3 Yankee fans, and that doesn't bother me one bit. I have no problem speaking to my feelings about Steve Cohen acquiring the Mets.
You also have chills, too. You also have chills. You felt
my hair, I'm telling you, especially when the announcement came that maybe de Blasio was going. I mean, that's another discussion if we want to start talking Andy Martino. But from a general perspective, I'm actually going to quote. You spoke about our former co-host of the show, Nick Partain. He tweeted after Steve Cohen was announced as the new owner of the Mets and said, "They made the World Series 5 years ago. I don't understand the woe is me attitude of Mets fans." I don't expect most Yankee fans to understand it, okay? And I know he's a Knicks fan. So, but it's not about the way that they spent. I don't want to say not about the way they spent money. It's not about their overall salary structure. It's the way they chose to allocate the funds that they spent. And I'm talking about the Wilpons right now. Since 2005, in theory, their only premier free agent signings, they've really had 3 top-tier free agent signings in the Wilpon era since 2005. Carlos Beltran, obviously that worked out pretty well. Jason Bay and Yoenis Cespedes. Now, the latter, the latter 2 of those 3, I think we could certainly question. And I really want to take it back to the 2010 offseason, which was the Jason Bay offseason, the season that they signed either Jason Bay or the guy that every Met fan wanted because they needed an outfielder, Matt Holliday. And what historically for the Mets have always signed players whose primes were ending or close to ending because they could get them on more team-friendly deals. They wanted to sign guys to less years, less money. So as a result, the Mets don't get the number 1 coveted free agent outfielder. He stays with St. Louis on a 7-year, $120 million deal. 2 World Series titles later, Jason Bay, one of the worst free agent signings in Mets history, arguably, 4 years, $66 million, never produced the numbers that we saw in Boston. Scott Boras put it perfectly. The Mets will always shop at Fred's. It's a discount store. I mean, think about it this way. Think about the amount of money on the insurance policies that ownership saved on David Wright and Yoenis Cespedes, and the fact they both didn't play for upwards of 3 years each. The amount of money, and from what I've read, has told me that they retained a very, very good chunk of that money. They didn't even reinvest it into the team. Now, to Fred and Jeff, I won't ever give Jeff Wilpon any credit, but to Fred Wilpon's credit, okay, that was what they were able to do. They clearly lost a lot of money in the Madoff scandal, even despite their short arms and deep pockets. They really did nothing wrong. I think they honestly tried to put a good enough product out there on the field every single day. I just don't think they had the money to do it anymore, and they just tried to do the best they could. And I think the reason Major League Baseball kept them in there as owners is simply because of Fred Wilpon and Saul Katz's fantastic relationship with the league office that dated back to the 80s when Fred Wilpon was a minority owner of the Mets. When they won the World Series in '86 against the Red Sox. So I think that's a big reason why the deal got done. And it's just a welcome sight for Mets fans to now have the richest owner in baseball, a guy who looks like he's going to clean house and start fresh. He's already talking about what I love about making charitable, doing a lot of charity for areas in the New York City area. Never saw the Wilpons do a lot of that. I mean, granted, we saw a lot of what they did, after 9/11, how the whole city came together. But this is a welcome sight for Mets fans. The fact that they are now going to have proven dollars invested into the team to try and improve the team and try to finally go after what Mets fans have been dying for 2 decades, to go after premier, top tier, number 1 free agents on the market.
I think that was put perfect as a Mets fan, and I see 2 head nods and a chuckle there from Tyler, and I want to get his thought on the New York Mets and the next chapter of the New York Mets history.
So, first of all, just because I'm a Yankee fan doesn't mean I'm not happy for you, buddy.
I never said that. that.
Well, this is the way I see it, and Joe knows, and Rob, you may or may not know. I honestly don't know, to be honest with you. When the Islanders are doing well, I want the Rangers to do well too. It just keeps that New York rivalry strong, and I love it. If the Yankees are doing well, and if the Yankees do well, I want the Mets to do well, because then when I play you 4 times a year, I want to have fun with it.
I was happy for the Islanders. I'll be the first to say it.
You're a Ranger fan?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Your opinion's really irrelevant right now. No, only kidding. I like to see that, New York is a strong sports state again. Even if you go, the farther up north you want to go, even Buffalo's getting stronger. It's just overall, it's becoming a very solid sports state here again. I think there's a lot of pressure coming on Steve Cohen coming in. Not because he has big shoes to fill, because he has no shoes to fill, period. But when you buy a team in the MLB or any sport and you sign off and immediately become the richest owner in that sport, there's a lot of pressure on you to do something with that money. Now, again, I'm not giving the Wilpons any credit, but for the last couple of years, they made the signings, not that they wanted to make, but they had to make. They had to give DeGrom his money, and he didn't even get that much money. They've been constantly, we're shopping Syndergaard, we're not shopping Syndergaard. We might trade him by the deadline. We're not going to trade him, and there's still nothing really on the horizon for him. It's at the end of the day, it's very hard to blame them for the Cespedes contract, because at the time it was a great signing. They needed it.
Yes.
It was a great trade. He didn't give up a ton, but it was a great extension at the end of the season, especially when you come off a season where the guy's on the team that brings you to a World Series when you aren't supposed to make the playoffs, period.
Sure.
It's hard to question that move. Jason Bay, a little bit before my time, but it's laughable. I think one of the things with Steve Cohen this year is going to be very hard to judge his first year as an owner with looking at how shallow the free agency class is for this offseason outside of Trevor Bauer and a handful of others. Plus, a lot of these teams, including the Mets, recovering from the lack of income from COVID. I think next year is going to be a lot of, give to get a lot in return.
Yeah.
From a marketing standpoint. So it's going to be very hard to judge Steve Cohen on his first year as an owner. I think you want to make a statement. Trevor Bauer is a free agent.
Not only is Trevor Bauer a free agent, but also, guys, hometown boy George Springer, who is from New Britain, Connecticut.
Boo!
Also, let's not forget, went to UConn as well and was Big East Player of the Year back in 2012. Rob DeLuca, your thoughts, that was before UConn left the Big East. Rob DeLuca, your thoughts on the new era for the New York Mets?
I think it's I'm with Tyler here. I think it's great. I mean, I want the Yankees to be challenged by the Mets here because it'll inspire them to actually do some things. The Yankees voted yes on this vote today. They were more than happy to see Steve Cohen come in and take over. Let the Mets be competitive. I'm with Tyler. I really do want to see the Mets do well. I think they need just a couple more signings to get them into the playoffs and give them that competitive edge. And now with Steve Cohen in charge, they're definitely going to have the money for it. So I know for a fact You definitely can't judge him in his first year, as Tyler said. He pretty much said it perfectly. But you definitely can use your money here and make one big splash here in someone like Trevor Bauer, per se, or even George Springer. I'm no fan of him myself. But nonetheless, I think we will see something interesting from Steve Cohen this first offseason. It'll just be a matter of when, and a matter of who, and a matter of how much, and a matter of how will it help the Mets. I think we will see it.
Yeah.
I will tell you, though, Rob, I think the one player that we haven't mentioned that is really of the biggest interest and should be the biggest interest, but I just don't know how much money, the money that he wants and how much money he's really going to get, is JT Realmuto. That's the Mets are in dire need of a catcher. I think you might. I really don't know what prospects after Brody has basically sold the farm this last year and a half to really trade for. I think you might, because it doesn't seem like the Indians want to re-sign him. I think the Mets are going to call the Indians about Lindor. I think there's definitely a possibility of that. I know there's been rumors of that, but again, I don't think there's too much feet to the fire just yet because we just hit free agency. But I want to kind of touch back real quick, Joe, if you don't mind, to the point about the Subway Series. Look, I was 13 when the Mets and the Yankees played in their first Subway Series in 1997, and I really saw, as a teenager and in my early 20s, the real peak and rise, even before the 2000 World, even after the 2000 World Series, like the real peak and rise of the rivalry of the Subway Series. When Shea Stadium and the old Yankee Stadium, there was not a seat to be found at all.
Yeah,
it might as well have been a World Series game. That's how packed that stadium was for any Mets-Yankees game. There is no doubt in my mind, despite the fact that they might still fill on an attendance figure, the Yankees and Mets rivalry, if we want to call it that, has lost its stamina over many years now. I mean, it's been granted, the Mets have won their share of games. I feel like every year the Subway Series always finishes 3-3 somehow. The Mets always take 2 out of 3 at Yankee Stadium, and the Yankees always take 2 out of 3 at Citi Field somehow. But there's no love to that rivalry anymore. And I think the way Tyler and Rob put it, as 2 Yankee fans, to see the Mets get better, to see that rivalry really rekindle, would be great for New York.
Yeah, and you know what? You brought up a good point too, where the rivalry is still there. It's not, and the Subway Series is still there as well. And you said it perfectly, Ian. I think where the love for that Subway Series rivalry has diminished a little bit, because now we've gotten to a whole bunch of different rivalries. We've gotten the Freeway Series with LA, the Dodgers, and the Angels. We've gotten now
Chicago.
The Chicago Series, where it's and we also now, which I've heard this too, and I think that's stupid as well, is Tampa and Miami, the Florida Series. Why? That doesn't matter. So then, you know what? So then it doesn't make sense anymore.
2 franchises whose fans could not care less about what happens to either of those franchises at all.
It doesn't make sense. So, that little spark, and that also goes back, fellas, to what Tyler was saying as well, where the credibility of baseball slowly continues to drop. And that's, I think, also something where that spark isn't there anymore. It might get back to where it was, especially because, and, again, I don't want to keep, giving Tyler so much credit, even though it is. Listen, I have to give credit where credit is due. He did say earlier, we are in New York. We are in the biggest market in the entire world. And especially when New York is a big, big sports city, state, town, whatever we want to call it. I think when the Mets start to do a few things, not now, and it's not going to be now, because just like how we saw a few weeks ago, right? We saw Matt Niskanen retire in the NHL, okay? I think we're going to see some of that also in Major League Baseball, because, and especially after the whole Justin Turner thing, there are people such as Ryan Zimmerman, we're not going to go crazy with this, but such as Ryan Zimmerman that are immunocompromised. Not only him, but also his family. We're going to see people, that includes higher ups all the way down. Sandy Alderson, let's not forget, he had cancer. He had a few other health issues as well. We don't know where he's going to be. And now we know that Steve Cohen wanted to bring him back because he loves him. Listen, Sandy Alderson was the general manager of the Mets in 2015 when they went to the World Series. Give him a blank checkbook, he could get you back there.
Took the words right out of my mouth, Joey.
He could get you back there. But I really do believe now, with everything going on with the coronavirus, and the uncertainties not only around the country but also in Major League Baseball, we definitely cannot give him. We cannot give him any discredit. We cannot throw anything at him as a Mets fan. You have to give it time. Me and Tyler know this very well. When Lou Lamoriello was instilled as the new president and general manager of hockey operations for the New York Islanders, well, that was under new ownership. It took time. It took a lot of time. Mets fans have to think the same exact way. I think it's going to take time because here with the Mets, Steve Cohen, that is, wants to clean the whole house. And that's really by rights what he should do from top to bottom. And I don't want to say the scouts because I have a good relationship with a lot of them, especially some from the Mets. But, listen, time's up. I hate to say it. It really is. Time to replace everybody in that system. One more thing, fellas. Steve Cohen, according to Forbes, want to go back to this, worth $14 billion, ranked number 1 in terms of Major League Baseball owners. The number 2 ranked owner is Ted Lerner, owner of the Washington Nationals, ranked number 2 at $4.8 billion. Fellas,
There's a $10 million gap in between. The $10 billion.
Yeah.
Not even million, billion with a B.
Yep. Then, and as we said last time, right? What did we say? B with a B and an M with a mill. So, that's what Forbes says. And
but Joey, can I just I'm just going to try and make a joke. I know it's not going to sit too well with Tyler, but I'm going to say it anyway. Someone's just got to tell Lou Lamoriello to go sign some free agents. That's what he's got to go.
Yes. Listen. Don't start Tyler now because we have a short amount of time. But next time
we got 8 minutes left here.
Exactly.
You know what, Joe? I'll tell you.
Can of worms.
I'll tell you now. So you're prepared in 7 days. I'll be back next week to deal with you on that one.
Cannot wait to see what the deal is there. Let's keep it moving, fellas. For those, as Tyler did say, he does have about 8 more minutes left. We are going to be welcoming Jaden Daly, the writer and head editor-in-chief of Daily Dose of Hoops, from 7 to 7:30. And then for the final half hour, we will be welcoming NCAA College Hoops Digest writer Jake Zimmer to the show as well. He will give us his thoughts on the Big East Media Day that just passed just 2 days ago. And college basketball is coming back. We don't know when. We know it's November 25th, but we'll get to that later on. Let's keep moving, fellas. Detroit hired A.J. Hinch as their next manager. We spoke earlier about the credibility. We spoke about the guys going down in terms of the lack of authority, the lack of whatever. AJ Hinch gets a job in Detroit now. What is this, guys? Detroit gets a good manager, or is this going to be just a media frenzy?
I love Tyler's comedy. I really do. Look, the White Sox inquired on Hinch too, and I know we're going to get into the White Sox in a second, but the Tigers quote was, now that the White Sox have La Russa, the White Sox did us a big favor. I think from a perspective, it's hard to take the cheating out of this conversation. It's a big part in why it's the reason the Astros won a World Series, right? But he's taking over a rebuilding franchise. He's doing something that he's already done before. Even who knows whether or not if the garbage cans were still existing in 2015 at that point when he took over as manager of the Astros. But he has that experience, though, as a transitional manager. So that's going to help him with the Tigers. The Tigers are not, even though I read an article that says that they're there. There's no way, at least in this person's opinion, that they have the type of players right now that could be compared to a Springer, an Altuve, a Correa, that you could tell me that maybe when Hinch took over the Astros in 2015, that he's inheriting the same type of team with the Tigers. No, this is a team that still is depending on a lot of prospects to pan out, especially right now. They have 5 top 100 prospects in the pipeline right now. 2 of them are with the team, one of whom was the number 1 overall draft pick in the 2018 draft, Casey Mize, the pitcher. They're waiting right now. Spencer Torkelson, the number 4 prospect in all of baseball, he's right now down in single A ball. So I think he's definitely got a little bit longer of a way to go, but I think this is a good opportunity at redemption for AJ Hinch, though.
Rob DeLuca, your thoughts?
Well, It's interesting because, yeah, as Ian said, the Tigers are not good. I mean, they're terrible. They're one of Major League Baseball's worst teams. This will not be the propelling factor. And if it by somehow magically is, then you're probably going to see another investigation, because there's no way the Tigers can go from winning 22 games or however many games they won in this 60-game season and then translate that into a full season and win and finish above 500, let alone anything halfway decent or anything near a playoff push. This team is not there. AJ Hinch is also a horrible, horrible human being when it comes to ethics of baseball and, playing for the love of the game and all that and sportsmanship. He doesn't follow any of that. I personally do not like this man. I can't believe he got a job so fast. If there was going to be a cheater reinstated that fast, I truly thought it was going to be the Red Sox rehiring Alex Cora that fast, because that is someone that the Red Sox love, and he served his suspension, and I had a feeling he was going to be back. I'm shocked it's not done already. If it is even going to be done, I expect it to, but obviously we'll wait and see. But yeah, overall, look, this isn't going to do anything for the Tigers. Even if they sign someone, look, to call a spade, don't think I can name more than 3 Detroit Tigers right now. That's how bad they are. I really just can't. And I mean, look, he is an effective manager, I guess, but it's not going to do anything.
Tyler Adele, your thoughts?
I'll leave you with my thoughts on this before I head my separate way. Kind of like what Rob was saying, I don't believe this is going to be a deciding factor in the Tigers organization. It's hard to judge whether or not AJ Hinch is a good manager without cheating, because you don't know when that cheating started. It could have been going on for a long time before he was caught, rather. Now, AJ Hinch claims when all this scandaling and investigation went down earlier this year, that he had no part in it. He told them to stop. He took bats to TVs. Unfortunately, you're never going to know the full story of that, because some players have anonymously said he did no such thing and he condoned it. Some players have come out and backed him. So clearly someone's lying. Unfortunately, it's a situation of hearsay. So you just have to assume, and I have no problem with assuming, that he's a dirty cheater. Now, when you look into the prospects, Casey Mize is really the only one that's like eye-popping. The Tigers they haven't been a free agent destination in a long time. I don't think they're going to be anytime soon.
I agree.
I think I'm going to give it, if something hasn't changed for them within the next 4 to 5 seasons, they have to really, really figure something out, because at this point, it's just getting flat embarrassing.
Yeah, I mean, back to Rob DeLuca's point, he can't even name 3 guys. I can only name 2 that I could think of. And remember Jordan.
I can name 2. That's it.
Jordan Zimmerman and Miguel Cabrera. That's about it.
Went to the Tigers?
Jordan Zimmerman? I got Miguel Cabrera and Nico Goodrum. That's who I got out of that.
Wow.
Wait, Jordan Zimmerman went to the Tigers?
Where have you been?
Sure?
Yeah, Jordan Zimmerman has been there. Yeah,
for a few years.
Yeah. He signed that big contract with Detroit.
Coming off that
I can only think like Miguel Cabrera and nope. I'm drawing a blank on
Joe, correct me if I'm wrong, but Jordan Zimmerman was signed to the Tigers not really too long after Scherzer was dealt out.
Yes.
He's been there a while.
Yes.
Yep.
No, I think it was right. I think he went to Detroit shortly after the 2015 season when he was like an NL Cy Young favorite.
Correct. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he's been gone for a while, buddy.
I didn't know where he went. I thought he was just kind of, gone.
Kurt Warner looking at
I can't believe my Yankee fans forgot all about Austin Romine.
Yeah, wow.
That's poor guy.
Ladies and gentlemen, Tyler Adele, back from the dead. We really appreciate you coming on, and we'll hope to see you soon. And a ton of fun for you to come on here and giving us some good comedy this evening.
Joe, it's always a pleasure to be here. I got some familiar faces. I've got a new face that's going to become a familiar face very soon. I'll deal with you again next week. Like I said, congratulations on your owner. You still have Bobby Bonilla's contract for infinity years.
Oh, it's
Joe, again, thank you for letting me give my sister's GoFundMe a shout out. Remember to just donate to the links if you can, and I will see you guys next week.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, that is Tyler Adele. Ladies and gentlemen, that is Tyler Adele. We are going to bring in someone that is very, very notable to us, and especially some that are really good in the college basketball field. And I got to tell you, this guy, Jaden Daly, we actually have the same birthday, which has got to be the coolest thing. And not only that, when I found that out with him, August 22nd is like the greatest day ever now because I share a birthday with someone so great. And Daily Dose of Hoops. I always say Daily Dose of Hopes. I don't know why. Daily Dose of Hoops, editor-in-chief and lead writer and the founder of this website, Jaden Daly, ladies and gentlemen. Jaden, how are you? And to your right or left or wherever it is, that's Rob DeLuca. Ian Schraier is there as well, in case you don't know them. But Jaden, how are you?
I don't, and it's a pleasure to meet the both of you. Joe, I'm awesome, buddy. Thanks again for having me on. I hope the same for you.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it, and we're really happy to have you on here because as Rob DeLuca knows, he's a diehard St. John's Red Storm fan, and always goes to me with a whole bunch of questions that I'm not really the one that could answer. It's more Jaden Daly that could answer that. And it's really what we saw last year, and this is something that Rob DeLuca always says, is that we are national champions just because we were the last team.
Big East champions.
Oh, Big East champions. Okay, all right. Well, I've heard you say a few times we were national champs.
We could have been.
I've heard some people say St. John's is the reigning national champion too. So I guess you're not that far off.
because they were the last team that played, right?
We were in the lead at halftime. What can we say?
Crazy stuff. So let's get into it. So Jaden, we obviously have a lot of St. John's fans on here, a lot of Seton Hall fans on here, and not only does the Hall know who you are a legend in the Prudential Center, but also at your alma mater at Carnesecca Arena. There's so much talk not only of the uncertainty of games being played, but also the ninth place coaches poll ranking for St. John's this past week. And as we know, we'll take a peek at the coaches poll in the Big East, and we obviously know that Villanova ranked number 1. They got 9 of those votes from the coaches. Creighton was selected in the top by 2 of those coaches, and we look all the way down. Georgetown ranked number 11, but also we say number 11 because there is a brand new team in the conference. Not really a brand new team, but someone that returned home, and that is the University of Connecticut. So really cool stuff. And Jaden Daly, I want to know your thoughts on St. John's being picked 9th in the coaches poll. Is that too low?
I think it is. And you know what? I give credit to Mike Anderson and the 3 St. John's players that represented the team in Media Day, Julian Champagne, Rasheem Dunn, and Greg Williams, for having a quiet confidence and really being unfazed by the fact that the team was picked 3rd from the bottom. I personally had St. John's either 6 or 7, depending on where you value Xavier. It's a coin flip either way. But to rank St. John's 9th just off the influx of new talent that's sight unseen until now, I think it's an unfair barometer. I really do. You still have players on the roster that you saw last year in Williams and Champagne and Dunn and Marcellus Earlington, who I think is going to have a really big year based off the Big East tournament that he had and the big game he had down the stretch against Georgetown. There are a lot of pieces in play here, and even some of the new talent, the junior college players, the freshman Posh Alexander is drawing rave reviews. I need to see what he does personally before I jump on that bandwagon. But with a roster that has the depth and the pieces that Mike Anderson has brought to St. John's, I'm not crazy about the 9th place pick, Joe. I'm really not.
Yeah, it's just to ask even Ian and Rob, but especially Rob DeLuca, who's also who's a St. John's fan as well. It's really crazy, Rob, to see about to see this team ranked 9th in the coaches poll. And I know, especially because we've spoken about it. I've seen you at a couple of games before against Nova. But to be able to see St. John's with this influx of talent, as Jaden said, it's very difficult to say that this team could be ranked 9th, especially when there's a decrease in these upperclassmen that have led the Big East, such as Miles Powell, Marcus Howard. Georgetown is going through a complete rebuild when they lost 2 or actually 3 or 4 of their guys last year to a couple of transfers. Omer Yurtseven, he was a grad student. He didn't get anything going in the game against St. John's in the Big East tournament. So to be able to see a lot of these players now really move on to the next phase of their life, this is now the time where St. John's could potentially pounce on that. DeLuca, I want to know your thoughts, and if you have any questions for Jaden, same thing with Ian, of course. We'd love to hear those questions.
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely shocked, Joey. When we talked off the air, it seemed like you and I were both pretty agreeing on the fact that they'd be roughly in a 6-7 spot. Like it just doesn't make sense that with most of this team returning and then adding talent, and all of a sudden they're getting ranked lower than last year. I don't even understand how that can make sense. This team, led by Coach Mike Anderson, they went to the to the quarterfinals of the Big East tournament and took Creighton to halftime with a lead. They were playing maybe a little over their heads, and we don't know what would have happened in the second half. Momentum was certainly on their side before COVID paused everything. But, I mean, I'm just surprised to see that this team is 9th compared to someone like Butler, who's dropped off. Marquette has dropped off. Even, Xavier's down a little bit. I would not be surprised to see St. John's sit by it if the season is in full, of course, and everything. I would not be surprised to see St. John's sitting right about under Seton Hall there in the 6th spot, if it's just me personally. And Jaden, I guess just to get another perspective from Big East Media Day, I'm curious what you heard from Coach Anderson or the St. John's players that kind of has you in the same thought process, that it's above, that they should be above 9th place and more in like a 6th spot.
Rob, I think really it's the media that made more of a story out of the 9th place pick. Zach Braziller, who does some great work for the New York Post covering both of the locals on either side of the river, asked that to the players, and Julian Champagne had a great response. He goes, I'm really not into the politics or the personal stuff or anything like that. Opinions are opinions. That's what it is. And I took that as, we know what people think of us, and it's going to be on us to make sure that we prove them wrong. And, Seton Hall has a similar feeling. They were picked 5th because losing Miles Powell, and what's getting lost in the shuffle is that Quincy McKnight and Ro Gill are also gone. Yeah. Sandro Mamukelashvili came out flat out and said, I have a feeling the coaches are going to regret this, but we'll see. And I think the same can be said for St. John's too. You're going to ultimately realize you were wrong picking this team with this talent 3rd last. Even though you haven't seen the newcomers, there's more than enough of a sample size, I feel, from the incumbent talent to where Butler, who loses Kamar Baldwin and didn't have a clear second piece, and Marquette, which lost Marcus Howard, which lost Sam Hauser to transfer last season and doesn't have much in the way of talent other than Kobe McEwen and DJ Carton, the point guard from Ohio State, who's eligible. Theo John is a serviceable big man. I don't buy into him being like a Delgado or even a Sadiq Bey from Villanova that'll set box scores on fire, but the difference in talent is more than negligible, I feel.
Ian Schraier, any questions for Jaden on St. John's, their Seton Hall, or even the Big East in general?
I think the part for me in the poll that's a little bit head scratching, and I know they had a solid year last year, is Providence at 3. I mean, but in St. John's case, Jaden, my question is more in related to you have a lot of guys now with the loss of LJ and the loss of Mustafa. You have a lot of guys coming together, and Julian had a phenomenal year last year. There's no denying that. But you have a lot of guys coming together that really haven't played together. COVID-19 has really kind of limited exactly what they can do on the court in terms of practice. So how much in terms of the poll and how much looking forward to the season, how much of that is playing off the fact that LJ and Mustafa are not there anymore?
I do think that had a lot to do with it, Ian, and I'm not going to sit here and lie to you about that. I do think that played a big role in everything. St. John's was hit a little harder by COVID and has to start further behind the 8 ball because of Andrew Cuomo's restrictions on indoor gatherings and when schools can resume. So St. John's, being in the heart of New York City, was hit a little harder than maybe a Creighton or a Butler or a Xavier or one of the Midwestern schools where there wasn't as much of a COVID outbreak at the start of the offseason would have been. So, yeah, that definitely played a role. And also, the familiarity isn't what you'd expect from a 3 or 4 year program where you only have 1 year of Mike Anderson's system under your belt and there's still more to put in place. You only taught the basics, and losing 2 star pieces, one of whom was out for more than half the season anyway due to injury last year, it does handicap you. But at the same time, I do think the overall talent level on this team is strong enough to overcome that.
Now, I want to move over to Seton Hall, because Seton Hall obviously has lost the aforementioned, as you brought up earlier, Romaro Gill, Quincy McKnight, as well as the legendary Miles Powell, one of the greatest players to ever suit up for the Seton Hall Pirates. And Jaden, now we look at Bryce Aiken heading in here now to Colm Olson as well from Canisius, and you know him very well through your Mac connection and being the main writer for the Mac, really. And not only that, but also with Sandro Mamukelashvili, who was testing the waters last year in the NBA draft, and how big it is for Kevin Willard that he comes back and leads this team, especially now with Ike Obiagu, who really now is slated to take over that 5 spot.
Yeah, Ike Obiagu still intrigues me because he didn't do much last season. Romaro Gill's emergence really put Obiagu into the second unit. So I do want to see what he does there. But you're looking at a front line that's very deep. Behind Mamu, Tyrese Samuel is going to be much improved as a sophomore. Everyone's forgetting about Jared Rhoden, who I think is going to be an All-Big East player by the time all is said and done in March. This is the guy that almost averaged a double-double as a freshman and had a great rookie season last year. So I do think Jared Rhoden, 2 years ago, Rhoden will be a junior. I stand corrected. I do think Seton Hall is very deep and very talented up front. And Bryce Aiken, Kevin Willard said, is something that he hasn't had in a long time. A scoring first point guard, maybe going back to Isaiah Whitehead, where after him you had Kadeem Carrington, you had Madison Jones before that, who was a stopgap in between Whitehead and Carrington, and Quincy McKnight, who could score but was more of a pass-first point guard, a combo guard that got everybody involved. Bryce Aiken can go out and get 20 points on any given night. And Willard said, can he do it? Absolutely, but he doesn't have the pressure, and Willard doesn't have the pressure to where Aiken has to play like a Miles Powell and don Superman's cape. I think that only makes Seton Hall even more talented. And you brought up to Colm Olson, who I don't think anyone has paid enough attention to. This is a former MAC Rookie of the Year and first-team all-conference player at Canisius, who's going to put up 12 or 13 points per game just off sheer talent and sheer opportunity and ability. Wouldn't shock me if he did a lot more, but he doesn't have to set the world on fire, and I think that's going to make this team much more formidable.
It's really amazing to say that, because I remember after COVID-19 had hit and everything was done, and people were hoping and praying that the winter athletes would be getting an extra year of eligibility, so then they would be able to see a full season come from Miles Powell. But unfortunately, it didn't work. And again, as the other two, Quincy McKnight and Ro Gill, to see another year in addition to the guys that were coming in, such as Takal Molson. And, now obviously we're seeing, these guys come in, and especially Bryce Aiken as well from Harvard as well. The craziest thing too is that also the Ivy League is not going to be playing, and that was something else, Jaden. I don't remember which reporter had asked that question, but now you look at the big picture here, and you say to yourself, Bryce Aiken really landed at the right place at the right time, because he could have been still at Harvard, or he could have maybe transferred to another school, wherever, that they're not going to be playing this year because of lack of funds and lack of testing, etc. So talk about that and how his right place at the right time moment, and Kevin Willard bringing him in when obviously he wasn't not only that, and we know this very well, he also was not there. There were a few other choices that were in front of Aiken as well.
Yeah, it was a stroke of convenience more than anything. And for Kevin Willard, I think the relationship that he and his staff had in recruiting him initially as a freshman played a major, major factor. Aiken's an in-state talent and played at the Patrick School and was heavily recruited by Seton Hall. Would have gone into the program with Miles Powell had he signed. Instead, opting to go to Harvard, and you get an Ivy League degree and you're pretty much set for life. So
yeah,
it's a stroke of convenience that Aiken just happened to be there, and the Ivy League doesn't allow for fifth-year seniors. That's another story for another day, and I think it does players a disservice, but let me get off my soapbox a little bit. To have Aiken there and to have him pretty much in your backyard to fill the need that you have, it's just another example of how Seton Hall has been blessed over the years since Kevin Willard got there, and particularly the last 5 or 6 years since the Whitehead class came in with Carrington, with Desi Rodriguez, with Ish Sonogo, with Angel Delgado. That group really changed the program around, and I do think Aiken's going to do a lot more than his numbers are going to let on. You might see 10, 11, 12 a game, but within those stats will lie the impact.
I want to go to where Kevin Willard brought up, or actually Zach Braziller brought up about the schedule also. And right now, Marquette, we actually discussed this last week. Ian and Rob and myself, we discussed this, where it was a big concern where you have programs that are going to be in a mandatory 14-day quarantine, regardless of tests. That's just how it has to go, and that's just from the NCAA. And we don't know. There was some talk, obviously, from Big East Commissioner Val Ackerman that it's possible where it could be moved down to 10 days, but that unfortunately didn't pan out, as we saw John Rothstein, what he said today. So I want to play the clip from Big East Media Day where where Zach Braziller asked Kevin Willard about this 14-day test and the 14-day quarantine, and his thought on a functional 2021 season if no rules change.
It's going to be almost impossible, because let's just say Wojo just did it. He had one kid test. So now he's going to quarantine for 14 days. You're going to need 4 days to get your team back. And then you're still going to be testing. What happens now when someone else gets tested positive? Now you're down for another 14 days. Right? It just doesn't make sense to me if we're going to test so much, why we're not using the test to kind of keep moving forward. We're testing every 2 days. So we're going to know exactly where someone got it, when someone got it. We can isolate that person. You could test the next 2 days, and you'll know if he was able to spread it or if any more has it. So I think moving forward, I think people really got to look at this, and we got to use the fact that we're testing so much to our advantage. And I think that's the direction we have to move. Football did it, baseball did it, hockey did it. Sports are doing it right now in other leagues. I just think for basketball, we got to be a little bit more aggressive with the fact that to use the test to our advantage. If we're going to test as much as we're testing, we need to use those. We need to use the history of the test to kind of keep moving forward.
Okay, Jaden Daly, I want to ask you this, because you're at the Rock all the time. You travel to hundreds of games, every few years. You've done Midnight Madness. You've done you in March, during March Madness, you've gone from the Times Union Center all the way to Madison Square Garden, and you took a nap. And you've done this. So to see that, to see a functional season, do you agree with Kevin Willard where, it's completely impossible?
I wouldn't say completely impossible, but I do agree with him in that.
Hold on one second, Jaden. Can Ian and Rob, can we hear Jaden?
I'm having a little hard time.
He's a little soft, yeah.
Yep, we're having a little hard time hearing you, Jaden. Let's try that one more time. No.
He's still coming in pretty low.
Yeah, still coming in pretty low. I want to shift it though. While Jaden gets that fixed up, I want to go to the SID of the room here. Ian Schraier, do you agree with Kevin Willard and that 14-day rule where we don't know what can happen?
I just think in a sport like basketball, it's so tough, and I think that if we're going to, I think we discussed it last week too, that the cost of testing and the amount that's going to need to be done to keep these guys healthy and to keep these guys from being exposed. I just think there's just so many hoops that we're going to have to jump through. I'm hoping. I mean, look, we're hearing a lot of announcements of a lot of mini tournaments going on. We're hoping that will kind of create that bubble-like atmosphere that will hopefully. But what happens when we start hitting conference play? I mean, are we going to start playing games in one arena? What's going to happen in the NCAA tournament? I mean, these are things that have to be thought up now. I mean, season's starting in a month.
Jaden Daly, let's try you again.
You guys got me now?
Oh,
yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, my phone's crapping out, so if you don't see me, it's because I'm speaking into my speaker. So I do agree with Kevin Willard in terms of the NCAA allowing college basketball to test out of the 14-day periods. If every other sport's doing it, why not let the NCAA do it too? I think there's really no rhyme or reason as far as each guidelines go. If you shut down, it's not just 14 days. When you talk about the restoration period to get everybody back up to speed, it's more like 19 or 20. And I had a similar conversation yesterday with Tony Bozzella, the Seton Hall women's basketball coach. And he said the same thing, that for programs, especially those that are more up-tempo and heavily reliant on a press and run attack, it's more like 3 weeks that you're shutting down, and that's going to kill the whole season if one person tests positive. I think you should take advantage of testing and use the previous tests to build upon that. Hopefully that happens as we go further into the year. I do think the science behind it will improve to where it can be done, maybe not as efficiently as you'd hope right away, but eventually get to a point where you're having a similar result to the four major sports that have been able to test. And aside from the Justin Turner fiasco, I don't know if you guys touched on that before I came on, has been pretty much incident free.
Yeah, we almost spent the whole hour discussing the LA Dodgers just by themselves. But DeLuca, any final thoughts on that before we get to the next question? For you?
Is Kevin Willard always that well spoken? Because my God, could he not be? Like, I'm a St. John's fan. I friggin' love this guy. All right, he is so well spoken, and he's on the money here. He is 100% correct, because as Jaden said, shutting down for 2 weeks is not shutting down for 2 weeks. It's essentially more like 3, and essentially you're losing it. You could lose in 3 weeks' time. You could lose 7 games at that point. 7 games be gone at that point, and that can't happen. That's not. He is absolutely right. If we don't get rid of this 14-day quarantine, a full season is impossible if we go off one test where the kid can be isolated. Obviously, look, we want no cases. Obviously, it's clear and obvious, but it's just going to happen. College football just lost Trevor Lawrence for this weekend, and so it's clear. Even the superstars, they're going to get hit. But that doesn't. But look, they're still playing them. They're still going to play tomorrow at noon on ABC. Quick little promo for my job there. But they're going to be doing it with their backup quarterback. Yeah. Now, Clemson's probably still going to win the game. It's just not going to be by as many points. It'll probably be a little bit of a closer game, so to speak. So I think you definitely have to use the testing to your advantage. If you can manage to isolate the one player or the two players that do contract it. If you can get, like college football does, 2 or 3 consecutive negative tests on everybody else, keep on going.
Yeah, it's I don't know what's going to happen, especially as Kevin Willard said, Marquette is done for 2 weeks, and it's not only the men too, it's the women as well. And we don't know who tested positive on the women, or we don't know if it was 2 men, 2 women, 1 and 1. Maybe it was a staff member. We don't know. There's certain HIPAA laws that we're not allowed to, or they're not allowed to reveal that information to us because they're all student athletes. But one final question for Jaden Daly before we wrap this up here, Jaden. This is a biggie for you, and I think that really where we can't go and be a part of the crowd. Well, not the crowd, but maybe in terms of press row. I know you can, so you might be able to still do it. We'll see. The Big Ten ACC Challenge, Rutgers and Syracuse and Jim Boeheim heading to the rack. Are you going to make it down there if you can?
If the media situation allows itself, that's a definitive yes. I was at the rack 6 times last year, and I'll tell you, there's nothing like it. If you guys haven't been down to Piscataway, it's a great atmosphere for college basketball, especially when you get 8,000 people and the place turns into an absolutely bat-you-know-what crazy nut house, which the Syracuse game would have done. That does a major disservice for Rutgers. And I think, and when I spoke to Steve Peichel a couple of weeks ago, he said his biggest concern was not about how much real hype the team handles. Yes, he's worried about that, but also how the team handles playing in an empty rack where Rutgers enjoyed such a huge home court advantage last year, winning 18 of 19 and beating ranked team after ranked team. I think this is a major test for Rutgers early in the year, December 8th. The Seton Hall game is still pretty much up in the air and being worked on. But yeah, if the media setup permits itself, I'll be there. Absolutely.
Ian Schraier, one final question for Jaden Daly before we head over to our good friend Jake Zimmer.
Sure. I just have one final question. I definitely wanted to ask you one last question about Seton Hall. I kind of want to flip the script here as if to say that this season's going to go off without a hitch. I mean, I think everything kind of suggests that it won't. But if it does, and we do have a tournament, we all feel, I think, in some way that Seton Hall has kind of built up this resume as with all the players that have come through that program under Kevin Willard the last 6-7 years, that they could be a team that could really make a Sweet 16, Elite 8 run. They've been that talented, but seems like they're always the team that's making that first or second round exit. Do you feel that this could be a team that could make that kind of a run? And if so, who needs to really be those top performers for them to make that kind of run?
It depends on what kind of a draw they get. And to answer your question, Rob, the way Kevin Willard has warmed up to the media is unbelievable. When he first got there, he was the complete opposite of what he is now. And what Joe and I get to experience on a regular night covering Seton Hall. But I do think Seton Hall is talented. They'll win a game in the tournament. Whether or not they get out of the first weekend remains to be seen. I want to see what kind of a year Mamu has. I do think he can get close to 20 a game or be at least a 17 and 8, 9 kind of guy. Jared Roden's going to have a big year. Miles Cale is key for me because there have been times through the first 3 years where Miles Cale has been inconsistent. He'll show up and he'll give you big games like he did at Maryland and like he did against Kentucky at the Garden. But then there are going to be days where he goes 1 for 5 with 2 points and 3 fouls. So he's got to make sure that he's consistent. Bryce Aiken will provide a steady hand in the backcourt. I want to see what Carl Molson does right away. I'm very high on him, having seen him for 2 years. But the key is going to be Mamu, Roden, and Cale, the big three. Cale in particular, if Kevin Willard gets a lot out of him, you're going to see this team make a deep run.
Jaden Daly, ladies and gentlemen. Jaden, I can't thank you enough for joining us here on the Primetime Rundown, and especially because college basketball is slowly creeping up on us. I can assure you we are going to love to have you back on when the time comes, because there is no Big East basketball without Jaden Daly.
Joe, my pleasure. Thank you for all you do. Rob, Ian, nice to finally meet you guys somewhat, and I look forward to communicating with you guys a little more as the year goes on.
Absolutely.
Likewise, Shane, thank you.
Thank you so much. Really, really a pleasure. And let's get in the next in our next man, because this is the coolest thing. And I have to tell this story. And I always say this because whenever Jake is on a podcast or anywhere with me, I always say this story to everybody. And I know I said this when we did our interview together, but I met Jake when we were at Bryant University, and the bottom line was that the marketing person next to him was the cousin of an old friend of mine here in high school. And all of a sudden, he knew people that I knew, and it was the weirdest thing. And I'm an SID, and I thought that I would run into Jake maybe at the dunk, but no, I run to him at my job. It's the weirdest thing. Really, I think, Jake, it's got to be the coolest thing because again, I'm really happy to have you here. And, now for a proper introduction, writer, Jake Zimmer, ladies and gentlemen. Jake, how are you? Ian Schraier, Rob DeLuca, that is Jake Zimmer. Really, really appreciate you coming on here, buddy.
Always a pleasure, Joey. And I mean, you think of the circumstances which we met back in, that must have been February now, which, come to think of it, that's almost 8 months. That's almost, that feels like years ago, right? Turns out we strike up a conversation. We both know, lo and behold, your previous guest, right? Jaden Daly, right? So the connections kept going from there. And I will never forget a big shout out to Matty Massa over at Bryant, who said, "Oh, I know that guy's. I guess he had some connection of some sort back from high school, from the Long Island days." And it's bottom line is it's great to be here again with you as always.
Yeah, really, really fun to have. Really, really happy to have you here. And you are from the New England area, and you cover. You've done work with Bryant, you've done work with Providence, and now the biggest thing here, the biggest storyline here. Now we'll get into the New England area. Providence coming back and really potentially being a big powerhouse in this league. But let's not forget, there's a new team that has returned into the Big East, and that's the University of Connecticut. That's UConn, the UConn Huskies, led by head coach Dan Hurley. And I think the coolest thing here, fellas, is that, and for all of us here, Ian and Rob as well, we are slowly going back in time, and what's old is now new again. We see that with game shows. We see that with games. We see that with television shows, whatever it is. And now we're starting to see it in the world of sports. We saw it in 2010 when the Winnipeg Jets revived itself. And now UConn coming back home into the Big East is got to be the coolest thing. Jake, so you were on the call of Big East Media Day, and you're very familiar with Ed Cooley. You're very familiar with UConn, or you will be now. Let's look at the let's look at the first team here, the preseason All Big East first team here, and we know obviously Gillespie, Robinson, Earl. We got that, but the biggest one on here that really sparks some sort of interest is David Duke. What you heard in that press conference from David Duke, not only he's so down to earth, it seems he's so well spoken, and really the coolest thing too, fans out there, and you can attest to this, is that Ed Cooley said that he's one of the hardest working guys in the gym.
Well, not only that too, Joey, I think when you see the way that Ed Cooley talks about David Duke and in relation to the plethora of talent that he's had over the years, you had guys like Rodney Bullock, who went and had a nice beginning to his professional career. The list goes on. I won't even go down the professional route of Ed Cooley products, if you will. But the way that he talks about David Duke is very similar, and he has acknowledged this many times, very similar to the way he talks about Chris Dunn.
Yeah.
Chris Dunn did not play on the ball his first 2 years in a Friar uniform. He was a two guard. People forget that in his first 2 years at Providence, Chris Dunn was not the point guard. He was a shooting guard. And that's very much the route that they've taken with David Duke here as well. He was behind Lawan Pipkins last year. Not even to say really behind, I would say the sense of complimenting him. But this year, Ed Cooley's been very clear about what his intentions are and the leaps and bounds that David Duke's made in his game. And not only is he a gym rat, the hardest working player in the gym, but he's also made leaps and bounds in his leadership. Ed Cooley had been asking about, or rather telling us about, how important that is. And I had the opportunity to ask David too, how much importance or how important that is that your coach believes in you like that to carry all of those guys. And he said it comes with a lot of responsibility. He said a lot of times people are going to be looking at him when he has a bad game, misses a few shots, seeing how he reacts. So now it's not the David Duke show anymore. It's how can David Duke be a model for those other 4 guys on the court? And I think that's going to be huge for a Providence team that returns most of their core, but also has a lot of new faces this year.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. And we're going to get to Ian Schraier with his question in a second. But the biggest loss for Providence, Alpha Diallo last year, he didn't get to complete his senior year, which really, really stings. And not only that, too, we also know the run that Providence went on, how bad they were in the beginning of the non-conference season and even into conference play, where when they lost to Long Beach State out in the Wooden Classic out in California, that basically spelled the end of the 2019-20 season. And then all of a sudden, Ed Cooley shows some magic. Ian Schraier, let's hear your question for Jake Zimmer.
Hey, Jake, I just kind of want to piggyback a little bit here off of what Joey was talking about with Providence struggles. We saw the struggles they had in the Big East in 18-19. Last year, they're obviously better. They finished 19-12. You can agree, disagree with me here. I think I was a little surprised by where they were kind of slotted in the preseason conference poll. I thought 3rd was a little high. What makes you believe whether or not they can live up to that prediction?
I think, and there's a shot of the coaches poll there too. I think I was a little shocked to see the coaches vote Providence as 3rd as well. I thought might be a little high considering, the struggles of last year, the big loss of Alpha Diallo, and basically 4 of the 5 starters, right? People look to Diallo and say he was the number 1 guy, but if you think about it, he had a lot of good talent around him. He had Lawan Pipkins, who we just talked about. Khalif Young is going to be a huge hole to fill in that lineup too. But if you take a look at the expected lineup for Providence this year, you return David Duke, AJ Reeves is back as well, Nate Watson. Those are going to be 3 big role players, as they were last year too. People forget, they mixed in the 3 of those guys quite a bit. AJ Reeves would start every couple of games. He'd have a couple of games where he'd put up 24, 26 points. And then Nate Watson, how about his defense? He is one of the most prominent defensive centers, I think, in this entire league. I think he's tenacious. If you ask his teammates and Ed Cooley, they'll call him a scrappy guy in the paint, right? So I think ultimately what the coaches valued a little bit higher than I had expected was the defense, right? Providence, again, you look at the national rankings and defensive efficiency last year, they were one of the elite teams in not only the Big East, but the entire nation too. They really held their opponents to really, I'm trying to find even the right words, right? But they slowed down their offense pretty significantly to the point where it was a defensive game. Every single time Providence took the court in the Big East and out of conference too, mostly in conference play. You saw that mainly in February, a little bit of early March, but every time that they had a great defensive game, their opponents were forced to backtrack. You saw that against Butler and Villanova, even though they lost both of those games at the Dunk. They were not playing their game. They were playing the Providence Friars. They were trying to beat the Providence Friars defense. So I think that, we saw the coaches value that defense a little bit more this year too.
Now let's move over to UConn. And I think because, now Jake, now that you obviously you've dipped your toe into the NEC, where you're at Bryant, and you do a lot of freelance work there. You do a lot of freelance work at Boston College as well, Sacred Heart as well. Your coworker, your fellow writer, Dan Gardella, does a whole bunch of stuff for Sacred Heart as well. You're no stranger, again, to the New England area. That's where you're born and raised. So now let's look into the next team in UConn. Now, I want to go towards some little stirring here of the pot, if you will. We had on Jaden Daly earlier, who covers Seton Hall like it's his, not only his job, but he just covers Seton Hall really, really amazingly. But there was a couple of rumblings there from Kevin Willard where it was, you know what? We'll let him we'll let him tell you, and we'll listen to what Adam Zagoria had to ask, and Jake knows exactly what I'm talking about, had asked Kevin Willard and then had asked Dan Hurley. We're going to play them back to back.
Well, it sucks for us. I mean, to be honest with you. I didn't vote for it. I voted against it, to be honest with you. I'm still really not that happy about it. Obviously, if you don't know, no one in this league listens to me, so it's not like I'm used to getting my way anyways. But I think for the league in general, I think it's great. It's a great program, great tradition, great history. I think the program where it's at now with Danny it's definitely on the rise. They have great players. I'm a big fan of what Dan does and how he coaches and how his teams play. And I think it's only going to make this league better. I mean, obviously, we've been the best basketball league in the country 3 of the last 4 years. I think they just help us to continue that trend.
So now, before we get to Dan Hurley and to the reaction from that, once Zags Blogs Adam Zagoria asks the counter question to Dan Hurley. I don't know if it was Zach or maybe I think it was Adam who had asked what his thought was about UConn re-entering the league, and as you can see, Kevin Willard, he's not too happy about it. And there were also some rumblings too that there were other coaches there who were not really on board with it either. Let's not forget, the coaches do not get to vote. That has to do with the school's presidents that have to vote to get these guys in. Let's see Dan Hurley's response once Zags asks him that question.
Please.
All right. Yeah. Listen. That logic. It doesn't make a ton of sense to me. But again, I'm not the coach at Seton Hall. Yeah, I don't.
I'm gonna tell you, and actually, when I heard that, Jake, I was crying because like that, especially when not only Dan Hurley is from the New Jersey area, but also his alma mater is Seton Hall. Does this give you a little bit, and especially because something that said the media hyped it up a little bit and whatever, and there was some sarcasm from Kevin, and again, that's what Dan thought as well. But now you really dive into it and you say to yourself, well, Dan is now going to be taking some potential recruits from New Jersey that Kevin Willard usually gets a part of too. And now Rutgers is getting better. So now there's 2 guys in there that could be stealing some of Kevin Willard's thunder. Jake, your thoughts on what Kevin Willard said and then Dan Hurley's laughable response?
Well, you made a really good point about the recruits and the dynamic, because not too long ago I came on the Primetime Rundown and we basically had a whole episode dedicated to what you had just talked about. Adama Sanogo is basically a lock to Seton Hall. And guess what? He's putting on the UConn Husky uniform as soon as he's eligible, right? So that's a big already. That may be why Kevin Willard said a version of what he just did. But I think, without reading too much into it, Kevin Willard knows that UConn's a threat. He's not a dumb guy. He's one of those he's a very smart coach. He's very well respected. And, I think I don't know if he meant as much emotionally as it appeared in the videos, of course, but I mean, he raises a valid point. UConn is going to be a thorn in the side of a lot of these schools. Let's not forget, they have someone's going to have to fact check, but I think besides Villanova, they probably, out of the 11 schools, have a very dense NBA population. I'd say at least in the top half of the league for sure, of guys that have gone pro into the NBA. So yeah, that's a league that's a program, I should say, that when they're in the league, if they catch a little bit of fire, that could be a huge problem for Seton Hall down the road. And this is coming at a time where Seton Hall, you look at their success in the past probably 20 years, nothing crazy to write home about. It's been a league historically dominated by UConn, by Villanova in recent years for sure. With perennial entrants, they come and go, right? But UConn is not a program that I want to be locked into facing twice a year for the foreseeable future. So I get Kevin Willard's comments, but unfortunately, he can't play by those rules anymore, right? He has to play nicely. He can't play by his own rules, I should say. He has to play by what his president signed him up for.
Ian Schraier.
I want to kind of keep things here with UConn and Danny Hurley, and my question is I want to take it back a few years ago when Danny Hurley was at URI, and really really what he did there and how he lifted URI to the heights that he did. And when he came to UConn, I felt that this was the perfect match. You had a guy who knows that network, who knows that area, who knows how to recruit, and he obviously succeeded in the NEC at Wagner. He succeeded greatly at URI. Where it really gets me has to do with the fact that I thought he really had a chance in his first year. And granted, he's taking over Kevin Ollie's team, but I think he really had an opportunity to put his stamp on the American, where there's a lot. Aside from Cincinnati, SMU, Houston, it's not the Big East. He had his chance to really put his stamp there. He didn't do it. Do you feel that as we go forward, is Danny Hurley the right guy for UConn, or are we going to be looking at another coaching change in a couple of years?
I think the next few years are going to be very telling. That's a great question, and if I had an answer for you, I'd be making a lot more money than I am now for sure. You make some great points, and I was describing Dan Hurley and his recruiting to a couple of friends a couple of days ago, and it took me until that I sent that text to realize that the way he recruits and the way he coaches are very similar to the program that Ed Cooley runs, and that he came in with the experience of an NEC school and Wagner, right? Very similar to what Ed Cooley did over in the MAC at Fairfield University. He was an assistant coach at Boston College for a bit under Al Skinner. Same kind of journey with Dan Hurley. Very credible experience among a wide variety of programs. He had the show to run to himself at, Wagner, and then, of course, URI. My goodness, the program that he's turned URI into, now they're perennial contenders every single year, right? Of course, beating Dayton, that's another story, right? I don't really think anybody in the A-10 can do that, no matter who's coaching. But Dan Hurley is a guy that's proved that he is at least worth a shot of being at the helm of a program and turning it into his own in the Big East. And that I think arguably you can say, if he does that really well at UConn, maybe picks up a league championship or dare I speak this into existence, a national title, then you really have to start talking about where Dan Hurley ranks in position to get a Power 5 job. And again, I think we're years out from that, but I think he has more than earned his shot to see what he can do with his roster. And look at the guys on the team now. He recruited most of these guys, believe it or not. James Bouknight's one of them. He just brought in Tyrese Martin. He purged him from URI. Look at guys like Andre Jackson, RJ Cole, people like those. Those are all Dan Hurley's doings. So we're really going to get to see what he does with his roster. I'm looking at this now, and with the potential starters this year, it's probably just Josh Carlton and Tyler Pauly that he didn't recruit. So this is going to be a really telling year for Dan Hurley. I think it's going to be a even more historically significant year for UConn than it really ever has been. So we're going to find out a lot about the Huskies.
I think that has a lot to ask then. My last question would be, we were talking with, as you know, we were talking with Jaden Daly earlier, and I kind of wanted to ask him the same question, but obviously I want to ask it to you as well, Jake. There's a lot of hope, I think, building up based on last season and what the talent that St. John's has around them. Based on what you've seen in the poll, is St. John's that surprise team in the Big East, or is there a team that really sits there below where you could see maybe one of those teams, maybe even like a Georgetown, like is Ewing going to finally lead them there? Like, who's the team really to watch out for this year in the Big East as a surprise?
Man, that's a really, really good question. I like the talent that St. John's is building. I think that Mike Anderson is clearly, again, talk about guys that have proven he's right for that job. A lot of questions about him when he came from Arkansas. He finally, and again, St. John's didn't have a great year last year, right? But Mike Anderson has been consistently talked about by Division 1, 2, and 3 coaches, and even in the NBA, saying that's the best hire that St. John's ever could have made, and arguably the best coach in the entire nation. That carries some weight. I think they're a couple years out from really competing. You saw what they did last year. At the end, if they had played that first round game the entire way through, I think we would have seen Creighton get upset in the first round, or the second round, I should say, after the buys. But I think they're surrounding themselves with the right talent. I think Greg Williams is going to have another great year. I think Posh Alexander has a lot of promise, right? Unfortunately, I think it's a little bit too premature to say that that's the team in the Big East to really climb the ranks in a significant manner. But what I do like this year is Marquette's addition of Dawson Garcia. Really love that. I think he might get a lot of flack for this, but I think he's a potential Rookie of the Year candidate. I think he's arguably the rookie with the most talent in the league. I really do. You have guys like Posh, you have guys like Andre Jackson from UConn, but I think Dawson Garcia has got big shoes to fill. He will complement Theo John really nicely, in my opinion. So Marquette's still got the talent. Marquette didn't really lose too many people. Obviously, you have the monumental loss in Marcus Howard, which we're going to see how that plays out. But I think Marquette could be one of those teams, provided that they are COVID-free, of course, after what they've been going through in the last couple of weeks. So provided that they're ready to go and have practiced and have a good chemistry, I think we could see Marquette make a little noise that I don't think, in my opinion, were given the cred for this year.
Well, they certainly have the right coach at the helm. Thanks, Jake.
So now, you brought up Dawson Garcia. It's very funny because the Big East kind of awarded him as the preseason freshman of the year. So, as you said, big shoes to fill with Marcus Howard not being there, Sakar Annam no longer being there anymore. Now it's Jamal Cain. Now it's Dawson Garcia, Theo John, those guys, Kobe McEwen. That really have to step up and see what Marquette can do following their COVID-19 bout. Rob DeLuca, final thoughts for Jake Zimmer, or any final questions on any team in the Big East?
Yeah, just to go back, we'll go to a team you're familiar with, Providence. Look, I'm actually not too surprised by their 3 spot. I think they definitely got the potential. I think that is a big reason just to the amazing coaching of Ed Cooley, as well as I think, and this is kind of my question, the importance of transfer from UMass, Dwayne Pipkins. I think he was a phenomenal grab last season, and I think he's going to play a huge part in Providence's success this season. Do you believe he's their go-to guy at this point with everyone they've lost and just everything going on this season? Someone who is still going to be around. He's young, but he's also experienced. Do you see him as kind of like the go-to number one guy, game on the line, give him the ball?
So let me clarify. So Pipkins, are you referring to him, his contributions last year, or?
Yeah, when he first got to Providence, absolutely.
Right. So Pipkins came in last year and he had big shoes to fill. Providence had no true point guard. As we just talked about, David Duke was not in a position where Ed Cooley wanted him to run the point last year, and he overperformed. To be honest with you, I think there were a lot of questions about his ability to succeed at the Big East level. Obviously, had a fine career at UMass. His redshirt senior year last year, did a really phenomenal job. I think his talent was off the charts last year. He was a great shooter. He made clutch shots, and he ran the floor the way he should have. This year, they've got that hole to fill, right? So it's a very similar year where David Duke is probably going to be, a mix of running point, with as being one of the more veteran leaders on that team, and but there's no true one guard. I think there's a lot of hype around Jared Bynum, who just transferred in this year, who from St. Joe's over in Philly. He had 11.3 points per game just a couple of years ago. I think he's going to be a fine option for them as well, I should say. And then, so you have Bynum, Duke, and AJ Reeves, who's back for another year. Nate Watson will play the center position. And then Noah Horkler from North Florida seems to be the guy that's going to run in the 4 spot this year. Horkler is a big guy. He's 6'8". He's going to be a redshirt senior this year. He had 16 points per game at North Florida back in the 2018-19 season. So he's going to be a guy that, Ed Cooley is going to rely on a lot. Cooley loves the way he can shoot. He loves his paint presence, I should say. And it's going to be another one of those years where they are going to have to rely on their depth too to carry them through the times that they can't. Those 5 guys can't be on the court. You look at a guy like Bryson Goodine with Syracuse. That's going to be a big addition. Ed Croswell from LaSalle. We don't know how he's going to be. He might plan to sit out this year too, but Providence is in another position to succeed. I think they're going to play great defense. It's a matter of those one or two guys. Maybe it'll be Bynum, maybe it'll be Horkler that comes up big, can make big shots, play really good defense. I think that's the key for Providence.
Jake, one final question for you while we have you here. We saw that there was a let's call it of sorts the Big East schedule that was released for the first month for the month of December. Everything obviously has been pushed up, if you will. December, we're going to see conference games. November 25th, non-conference games start. We're most likely going to see in the range of, at the bare minimum, and we've heard this as well, 13 games is the bare minimum that the NCAA wants teams to play. Again, want and can and could and should and would, or whatever words, that's a lot. But we'll see. 13 games and in the range of 13 to 25. I know, Jake, I believe that those were the two numbers that we heard. I think that was from Mike Anderson as well. We heard those two numbers. That's where the NCAA wants to have it at. Any game on the schedule that you see right now that is big and really that is intriguing come post-COVID, well, not post-COVID time, but the new Big East, if you will, or the new Big East season?
I think this is going to sound very biased, and it's going to tie in a lot of what we talked about today, but if your calendar's not circled for December 17th, UConn's coming to Providence. That's going to be two schools that were ranked, first of all, right next to each other in the coaches poll, three and four, and keep in mind, these are the coaches that are saying this. This is not the media. This is not AP. These are the coaches saying that Providence is the third best team in the Big East and UConn's going to be the fourth. That's one that you're going to have to keep your eyes on. I want to see how well James Bouknight does against an elite defense. And I really want to see how the Providence offense is shaking up at that point. They have a lot of good tests early. I think they're slated to play Indiana. They're slated to play TCU, both programs that historically have been pretty good. I think TCU's on the come up for sure. And we're going to have to see if the offense can turn it on against a UConn team that, we'll have to see what they're like on defense as well. But I am very curious to see how James Bouknight's going to do against a very rock-solid defense in Providence.
Yeah, they were talking about also Dan Hurley was, I believe, talking about, Jake, we heard that yesterday or 2 days ago, that James Bouknight's defense has really gotten so much better over the offseason and really last year as well in the final year in the AAC, in the American Athletic Conference. So we'll have to see what that's all about come December 17th. Ladies and gentlemen, NCAA College Hoops Digest writer / contributor / whatever the hell you want to call it, Jake Zimmer, ladies and gentlemen. Jake, I really appreciate you coming on. And as we told Jaden Daly, there's so much more college basketball to talk about, and we'd love to have you back on again because it was such a fun time here this evening.
It's coming. Thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate it as always. Ian and Rob, a pleasure. Joey, thanks for having me.
Of course, absolutely. Yep, we'll see you soon for sure, and have a great night. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's keep it moving here. We do have a few more minutes. Ian, Rob, college basketball is here, but we kind of forgot to touch upon something, and this is the most important thing right now. And Ian's turning his head, but this is one of his favorite sports, I think, and it's football. And we didn't really talk about that, but say it again.
What's really there to discuss?
Oh dear.
Well, and really, we're not going to go crazy with it, but there's one question that we have to ask here, and for all of our viewers that have tuned in for football, because we still got another few minutes here. Most important talking point for week number 8 or recap from week number 7. Let's just sum it all up and come up with one thing. Start with the info.
Oh man. Oh, most important. Where am I supposed to begin with this? Because I really can't touch on just anything when we only have a few minutes left here. But I think the biggest talking point that I really want to jump on maybe from last week, maybe this upcoming week, the 21-point spread between the Chiefs and the Jets. I'm kidding. But I think something that really has to be brought to light, and I'll be quick with it, is what's going on with New England. And not even just Cam Newton. Julian Edelman's hurt now. This is the first time since actually 2000 that they are currently having a losing season. They've got the Bills on tap this weekend. The Bills have a chance to move 3.5 games, I believe it is, up on the Patriots at this point. I mean, you're really at this point could be sending the Patriots to 2-5, putting them in a real deep hole that in a very deep AFC. So it would be a very difficult hole to climb out of, because the way you got to look at it right now is the AFC North has the Ravens and Steelers. They're both getting there. So one of them's getting the wild card. Granted, 7 teams are getting in this year. You shift over to the that's really probably the deepest division right now. I mean, even the Browns are a discussion right now. But Bills have a chance to do a lot of damage right now to New England. Newton's last 3 games, 1 touchdown, 6 picks. It's not looking good right now. If Bill Belichick wants to prove that he can win without Brady, this needs to be the game where it's.
Rob DeLuca, your final thought and most important talking point for Week 8, or a recap of Week 7?
I would have to say the most important talking point would have to be last week, Dallas Cowboys versus football team. We saw Andy Dalton go down on what can only be described as a cheap shot. And the fact that the NFL did nothing about it is shameful. It's not public humiliation levels of shameful like our friends over at the MLB, but it's certainly not a great look to see that Bostic got nothing for this, because that was a clear and blatant headshot. It took out Andy Dalton, and he's not playing this weekend. And now to get to an actual football analysis of it, Dallas is in big trouble here. They were in trouble to begin with when Dak went down, but now they're going on a 3rd-string quarterback. I mean, could he be the Lord and Savior? Maybe, but I mean, it does not look good for Dallas.
Rob, he was a 6th-round draft pick.
We all know
to Ben DiNucci.
Oh dear, Ben DiNucci. The next Tom Brady? Maybe, but probably not, because this is the NFC East, where everything comes to die. And everything is just in shambles. I don't know what's going to happen this weekend, other than Dallas just hang in there, because you're right there with us Giants and Eagles fans of this talk now, where we are all sitting at beautiful sub 500 records with nowhere to look but way down. One of us is somehow going to end up hosting a playoff game at the end of this season, and at this point, it is more than likely Joey Jarzynka's Philadelphia Eagles.
It was very funny because I was debating on buying tickets for this upcoming weekend. I'm a big germaphobe, right? And this, you would think, germaphobes going in the middle of a pandemic to a sporting event. But then I think to myself,
7,500 people in a 75,000.
No. See, that's the thing. 7,500 people, that includes players, that includes the guys on the field, that includes everything. So in terms of fans, that's about 5,200 in a 70,000 seat building. And the way that it's all spread out, I was like, you know what? If I wear my mask, if I have it taped to my mouth shut, I think we'll be okay. But tickets were too expensive because Eagles fans.
It's bad. I've looked.
I was going to ask you, what happens if someone comes standing up next to you at a urinal? What are you going to do?
Listen, let me tell you something. I'm going to empty the water bottle. I'm going to empty the water bottle, and we're going to do it that way if all those. Okay.
All right. Can I just say how thankful I am that we ran out of time on this show, that we'll have a whole new football week to cover next week, and the fact I don't have to talk to Rob DeLuca and argue with him about a kicker from Tennessee.
Okay. That's pretty good.
We weren't going to argue. What?
I think we're getting there. I think
we were. What were we? He won them 3 games. He lost them 1. Whatever.
The team to watch for is the San Francisco 49ers. Jeff Wilson Jr. He had a high ankle sprain after scoring touchdown number 3. He had 17 carries, 112 yards. He averaged 6.6 yards per rush and 3 touchdowns. And really, right now, I think the coolest thing too, guys, is that Jimmy Garoppolo became the second quarterback to defeat Bill Belichick, other than Drew Bledsoe. And he was entering Bill Belichick. That was 7-1 entering that game. We were talking about San Francisco and Seattle, guys. I think the biggest thing here is that there was some, ups and downs where the injuries have mounted for San Francisco. And now they're slowly beginning to get a little bit better. And I don't want to say that the 33-6 romping of New England in Foxborough, mind you, shows their true colors. But I think against Seattle's porous defense, similar to Swiss cheese, actually, will be a telling sign to see if they can compete with Seattle and also with the LA Rams. Let's not forget also, how about the Arizona Cardinals as well? The NFC West has got to be the best division in all of football, hands down, and it's not close. You know who's a close second? The AFC North. We'll get to that next week. So that is going to be my team to look out for. And again, San Francisco has a lot to prove this upcoming week. And I think it's not only America's game of the week on television, but it's also one of the best games on the entire Week 8 schedule. That's what I think, aside from Pittsburgh and Baltimore. But San Francisco, Seattle is definitely up there. Guys, any closing thoughts before we head to the credits?
I just want to know how 49ers Seahawks wasn't, somehow Bucks Giants can't get flexed to a Monday 9 a.m. game in London, and how they can't move 49ers Seahawks to Sunday and then somehow move Cowboys Eagles to maybe 11 a.m. in London.
Listen,
try and find two better games for primetime Sunday night and Monday night, because that's atrocious.
This is going to be awful.
I mean, I'm
we don't have our starting left guard.
Giants.
We don't have our left guard. He has COVID. Granted, it might only help because he's not that good, but neither is anybody else.
Like I said, I'm staying off another 30-minute Giants conversation. We'll leave it at that.
Rob DeLuca, any final thoughts before we get to the credits?
No, I'm good.
He's just done. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been a fun episode number 39. And wow, 39 episodes? Really? That's crazy. What does Adam Gase think about it? Whoa! He's 39. We're 39 episodes in. Next week is episode number 40.
That can only mean we have to make it special.
Really? Yeah, that's true. It is really amazing stuff. Something else that we want to get to as well. On Monday evening, we start a new trend. And this is something pretty big, guys, because Ian Schraier knows it all about this because he is the new host of this. So I think we have to let him say the preview of his new show, which also, well, it's not even his new show. It's our show now that is also episode number 40.
Well, like Joey said, I'm going to be very humbled to be sitting in the chair that's usually occupied by him on the Primetime Rundown Zoom interview series. But this Monday, November 2nd, 8 p.m., we're branching out into a new segment of the interview series where we will be focusing on an industry that I obviously have a lot of love for, and so does Joey, the athletic communications industry. And we'll be starting with the Associate Director of Athletics for Communications at nearby Hofstra University, Stephen Gorchov. He's been at Hofstra for just over 30 years. I kind of consider him more or less the godfather of Long Island SIDs. And since our footprint's on Long Island, I don't think there was a better way to start. So I'm really looking forward to Monday night.
Yeah, it's going to be tons of fun. 8 p.m. right here on the Eastern Observer, also channel 198 on Zingo Television, I-95 Sports Network. It can also be seen on channel 199 on Blackjack TV as well. Moving forward, ladies and gentlemen, as well, let's not forget our good friends at the Essential Wrestling Podcast. Episode number 26 comes your way on Tuesday night, election night, November 3rd at 6 p.m., presented to you by Pro Wrestling Pick'em. All can be seen right here on the Eastern Observer. The show's graphics are presented to you by Minutes to Bell Time as well. It can be seen here on the Eastern Observer, I-95 Sports Network, on Zingo Television Channel 198 as well. Also, we don't have a graphic for it, which is actually in large part my fault. It's not my fault because I've been building graphics and pulling video for all of us here this evening. But we continue our Scouts Minute and our New York Professional Scouts Association relationship and our little crossover series called the Scouts Minute. Tomorrow we will be highlighting the stellar career of amateur scouting director for the Arizona Diamondbacks, Steve Connolly, formerly with the Toronto Blue Jays under the Alex Anthopoulos tree. He was the one to sign former infielder Mike Aviles. So we'll get to hear more about the journey through Major League Baseball for Queens-born native, and also LIU Brooklyn Blackbird, former catcher for the Blackbirds, Steve Connolly. So, ladies and gentlemen, for one final time, we really appreciate you joining us here, and also special thanks to our good friend Tyler Adele, as well as the Daily Dose of Hoops founder and head writer Jaden Daly, as well as NCAA College Hoops Digest writer and contributor, and as we said earlier, whatever the hell else he wants to be called as, Jake Zimmer. So we really appreciate those guys coming on. Ian and Rob, we'll see you next week. Ian, we'll see you on Monday as well for the new show, for episode number 40 of the interview series. Ladies and gentlemen, one final time, I'm Joey Jarzynka, and for all of us at the Blackjack Media Group, we'll see you next time.